People who lived inside the fashion world in the late 1970s still talk about the way Gia Karangi could alter the atmosphere just by entering a room. She didn't train to be a model. She didn't chase the profession the way so many others clawed for it. She simply embodied it, the way lightning simply happens. The tragedy is that the same people who once begged to work with her didn't bother showing up when she was buried. Before we get into that, let's rewind for a moment. Before she was anyone's fascination, she was just a restless kid from Northeast Philadelphia, a long-limbed, sharp-tongued teenager trying to navigate a household that had collapsed long before she learned how to protect herself from the fallout. Her father worked endless hours running sandwich shops, too exhausted to understand a daughter who blasted Lou Reed at inappropriate volumes and painted her nails black. Her mother left when Gia was 11, a wound that never fully healed. Without a steady home behind her, Gia gravitated toward the outsiders, the glam rock disciples who worshipped Bowie and walked through the world like gender was a suggestion. With them, she wasn't imitating rebellion. She was living it. One night, while dancing in a smoky club pulsing with music, a photographer noticed her, not because she posed or performed, but because she didn't. She moved like someone who wasn't aware anyone was watching. A few weeks later, still basically a child, she boarded a train to New York with rain-soaked clothes and nerves, disguised as swagger. When she walked into Wilhelmina Models, the agency founder took a single look at her and signed her immediately. No tests, no hesitation, just instinct. Something about this strange, magnetic teenager from Philly felt like the beginning of a storm. Her rise wasn't gradual. It didn't simmer. It exploded. The moment she stepped onto set, photographers realized she was unlike anyone they'd worked with. She didn't hold poses. She moved, fluid, unpredictable, unfiltered. Cameras didn't direct her. They chased her. Editors fell in love with her rawness. Designers saw in her the edge they'd been waiting to put on the runway. Vogue covers stacked up in months, not years. Cosmopolitan featured her repeatedly. What made her extraordinary wasn't just her beauty, though she was striking in a way that made even jaded people lose their words. It was that she didn't fit the mold the industry had been recycling for years. She wasn't a sun-kissed California blonde. She wasn't polished or detached. She was dark-haired, androgynous, emotional, perceptive, vibrating with energy that felt simultaneously rebellious and fragile. At the center of her success was Wilhelmina Cooper, her agent and unofficial guardian. Their relationship went far beyond contracts and bookings. Wilhelmina understood Gia's vulnerability, saw through the bravado, and became the stable force Gia had lacked since childhood. Under her guidance, Gia flourished, professionally, personally, emotionally. She had built a small, safe orbit around Gia's chaos, and Gia thrived inside it. Then, with devastating abruptness, that orbit collapsed. In early 1980, Wilhelmina was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. There was no slow decline to brace for, only rapid, irreversible deterioration. Gia watched her mentor, protector, and surrogate mother fade away, powerless to stop the unraveling. When Wilhelmina died that March, something central inside Gia cracked open. She was 20, unmoored, and swallowed by grief too large for her to carry. New York's nightlife provided an escape that promised silence. Cocaine at first, quaaludes to come down, then heroin, whispered through hallways of clubs like Studio 54 as if it were a secret solution to every ache. Gia told herself she would stay in control. She wouldn't inject. She wouldn't fall too deep. She was wrong. Addiction doesn't negotiate, and grief doesn't let go easily. The descent was fast. One moment, she was the girl every magazine wanted. The next, she was the liability nobody could manage. She arrived at shoots high or trembling for her next fix. She cried on location because she couldn't find drugs. Photographers who adored her began making excuses not to work with her. And then the track marks appeared. Small red dots climbing her arms, impossible to hide. Rumors spread. Clients backed out. Agents distanced themselves. Even Sandy Linter, the makeup artist Gia loved with an aching kind of intensity, had to cut ties for her own safety. And still, Gia tried to climb back up. She went to rehab, left New York, attempted sobriety with all the strength she had left. A few people, including the loyal photographer Francesco Scavullo, gave her another chance. He arranged a final Cosmopolitan cover in 1982, a fragile, shimmering opportunity to begin again. The images were striking, but her eyes betrayed her. Dimmer, distant, as if something vital had slipped beyond reach. She booked sporadic jobs after that, brief flashes of her former self, but her addiction waited patiently, and when it returned, it claimed everything with ruthless efficiency. By 1983, Gia's career had ended. She was 22 years old. She moved between relatives, girlfriends, and borrowed couches, drifting through the remnants of her old life. The money was gone. The glamour was gone. She took small jobs, retail, cafeteria work in a nursing home, photography classes she never finished. Meanwhile, the drugs tightened their grip. Pride eroded. In Atlantic City, she began selling her body for enough cash to keep using. This was the same woman who once commanded thousands per shoot, the woman who had redefined what a model could be. That contrast still feels unreal. In late 1985, her body finally gave out. Pneumonia sent her to the hospital, where doctors discovered something far more devastating: AIDS. At a time when fear eclipsed compassion and misinformation spread faster than facts, the diagnosis was a death sentence. Gia spent her final months in a hospital bed in Philadelphia, frail and fading, visited only by family. She told a friend she wasn't afraid of dying, only of being forgotten. On November 18, 1986, she died at 26. Her funeral was small, heartbreakingly quiet. Not a single person from the fashion industry attended. No flowers from former clients, no tribute, no acknowledgement. The girl who once ruled runways was laid to rest like a stranger. But stories like hers don't stay silent. In the 1990s, journalists unearthed her legacy, writing books that brought her back into public memory. The HBO film Gia, starring a young Angelina Jolie, reintroduced her to millions and cemented her status as a tragic icon. Cindy Crawford revealed she had once been called Baby Gia, a nickname photographers used because she reminded them of Karangi's magnetism. Designers admitted they searched for models with Gia's boldness, her darkness, her refusal to be anything but herself. Magazines that had ignored her death now praised her as one of the first true supermodels, a pioneer of queer visibility, a symbol of unfiltered authenticity in a world terrified of rawness. Gia feared being forgotten. Instead, she became immortal. Not because she lived long, but because she burned so brightly, so honestly, that the world eventually had no choice but to remember.